moral conflict, right? To some extent, you have to say, all right, we're going to be the bigger person and not do this in order to end the cycle of violence for all human good.
No, buddy, I appreciate your altruism.
Right.
And we're going to be bigger people.
If somebody stabs me and I stab him back, then I get stabbed back again, right? Like,
I could give a rip about the cycle.
So
I care about my
I
family.
would be kind to somebody
You stick him or you stick me, I'm coming after you, bud, to teach you don't do that ever again. If you do, I'm going to knife you.
A contradiction to what you just said Jesus wants you to do.
Thank you. I'm jumping into your worldview.
So my general question is, what to you guys is the difference between indoctrination and education? Because I believe that the people that come to religion on their own are the people that most enjoy it and use it for the most good, and that forcing it on people can either hurt them or they will use it for bad purposes. And teaching it to children who cannot intellectually defend themselves and have no world experience is, I think, a big problem. And it is an interesting one. There's the example that Richard Dawkins uses of there's no such thing as a Marxist child or a capitalist child, right? They don't understand those things. And yeah, like one of my extreme views is that I don't think that anybody under the age of 18 should be allowed in any religious building.
Do you think kids are getting indoctrinated in public schools around here right now?
No.
They're just getting educated?
That's education, yes.
Really?
Yes.
You sure?
Yes.
Have you talked to their parents?
No. I was wondering what your answer is.
I would talk to their parents. They're getting more indoctrinated now than ever in the area of you can only be transparent with guidance counselors at their school, and the guidance counselors have had the parents sign certain documents where they are not even going to share things with the parents when the kids are only 7 years old. I mean, talk about indoctrination. Holy smokes. The level of dogmatism couldn't be any higher in our public schools.
Right. I'm a big believer in that. I mean, we don't let parents physically abuse their children. We do draw lines of what parents, they're not just like, all right, that's your kid, you can do whatever. And I'm a big believer in that society is required to look after everybody. And if that child wants to, I do want to withhold some things from my parent, I think they have the right to do that. Yeah.
So based off of the latest Harvard and Dartmouth studies, if you are going to church on a weekly basis, you grow greatly in your happiness and fulfillment in your 20s and 30s. Your depression chances drop significantly. Anxiety drops significantly. Drug abuse drops significantly. You become a much greater giver to your community. So why wouldn't you, if you don't take your kids to church, then you're abusing them?
There's the counter argument of that is looking at all of the people that have had their lives really messed up from religion and had bad experiences, and the huge amounts of, just gay people or throughout history, the people that have been targeted and religion being weaponized against them.
Mao Zedong.
In the dialogue above, the two speakers advance the claim that religious instruction of children constitutes indoctrination because children lack the intellectual capacity to critically assess belief systems, and I find this claim unconvincing due to its inconsistent standard for what qualifies as education. The argument presumes that public education is neutral, while religious education is inherently coercive. This distinction does not hold. Both systems transmit moral assumptions long before children are capable of critical self-defense. Declaring one framework education and the other indoctrination is a semantic maneuver, not a principled difference. The appeal to Dawkins' analogy about Marxist or capitalist children misidentifies the issue. Moral formation is unavoidable. The absence of explicit religion does not equal the absence of values. Public institutions also shape beliefs about identity, authority, autonomy, and secrecy, sometimes explicitly excluding parental involvement. The confident denial that public schools indoctrinate is asserted rather than argued. The rapid sequence of affirmations substitutes certainty for justification. When secrecy from parents is normalized, the claim of neutrality becomes increasingly difficult to defend. The exchange reveals a deeper tension. Freedom is being defined as insulation from religious influence while ignoring that all education forms loyalty, conscience, and moral intuition. If indoctrination means shaping unchosen beliefs in the young, then no educational system is exempt. We now continue with the debate or discussion.
Song over 110 million. Hitler over 6 million. Pol Pot 4 million.
Were they killing?
I mean, we just keep
atheism.
One warden who said, "In the name of the God that does not exist, thank you that you do not exist, so that I can do to this prisoner whatever I want to do." So Stalin, absolutely. These were atheistic regimes that were set up. You know, there were communistic regimes as well, where there was zero God involved. I mean, zero. And that's why, morally, they could do whatever they wanted to anybody and slaughter them. Makes a lot of sense.
Kind of away from the topic. Could we get back to what's the difference?
No, it's not away from the topic at all, because you were saying dogmatism and the way all these kids are abused in the Christian church, and I just flipped it right on you, and you had a tough time answering it. Look at Rodney Stark. He's an atheist sociologist. He passed away recently. He himself did all these studies. So I'm getting this from an atheist, not a Christian. I'm not quoting Christian sources here. This is a serious thing. And so to say that Christians somehow are indoctrinating more so than atheists or are doing more damage to kids than atheists is just simply not true. That is your worldview backed by zero science or studies behind it. But I took your point and basically took it to an extreme. What specifically, though, are you getting at? That you want? What is education?
In the dialogue above, the two speakers present the claim that religious upbringing is uniquely dangerous because it allegedly enables dogmatism and historical violence. And I find this claim misleading because it conflates belief with abuse and ignores ideological symmetry. The pivot to historical atrocities is not a diversion, but a legitimate stress test of the original accusation. If dogmatism is the concern, then secular ideologies must be evaluated by the same standard. The record of explicitly atheistic regimes undermines the assumption that removing God reduces moral danger. The accusation that Christianity uniquely indoctrinates children is asserted without empirical support. Citing Rodney Stark is rhetorically effective because it removes the charge of religious bias and reframes the issue as sociological rather than theological. The attempt to redefine indoctrination as presenting one side as true collapses under scrutiny. All education does this. Schools do not present mathematics, ethics, or civic norms as optional hypotheses. Selective pluralism is not neutrality. The punishment criterion also fails. Strong encouragement without coercive force does not meet the definition of indoctrination. Conflating moral conviction with abuse empties the term of analytical value. We now continue with the debate or discussion.
That does not go on in public schools.
No.
I was waiting.
He did not spank me and say, you better go to church with tears in your eyes and feeling like you're abused. No. See, our society today defines freedom exactly like you're defining it right now. No guardrails. And let's just pretend like you can do anything you want. That's called negative freedom. So, for example, if you go home, let's say 30 years from now, and you just start eating pints and pints of ice cream, and that's freedom, right? Eat whatever you want. Well, you're not going to see your grandkids or kids for very long because you're going to pass away. It's negative freedom. Positive freedom says there needs to be guardrails. There needs to be restraints in life. You cannot go against the fabric of the universe that God created, or you're going to end up completely demised fairly quickly. So to say that he indoctrinated me is quite comical because very early in my life was he saying, all right, do you want to believe this or do you not want to believe this? You better ask these big questions. And especially when you hit high school, when you have the ability to really think for yourself, you better be looking at all the worldviews. And so never did he force me to go to church, never did he force me to go a certain way, and he always opened the door for, you better ask any type of question you want.
And on the morality side of things and community side of things, there are ways that, I mean, yes, it absolutely gives you community, and there are it is a form of morality.
In the dialogue above, the two speakers argue that parental religious guidance undermines freedom, and I find this argument flawed because it relies on an incoherent definition of freedom. The distinction between negative and positive freedom is decisive. Absolute freedom without structure does not preserve life or meaning. It destroys both. Guardrails are not the enemy of freedom, but its precondition. The analogy exposes the weakness of the indoctrination charge. Compulsory schooling is universally accepted as formative, yet no serious person labels it abuse. Selectively applying that label to religious practice is arbitrary. The testimony undermines the claim of coercion. Encouragement combined with open inquiry does not constitute indoctrination. The presence of choice and questioning negates the accusation of brainwashing. If indoctrination is defined as exposing children to moral frameworks with expectations, then all parenting qualifies. The objection therefore condemns formation itself, not religion specifically. We now continue with the debate or discussion.
But
Well, he made me go to school. That's indoctrination. He made me go to school. Every single day. That was abuse.
Well, not only that, 75% of preachers' kids do not believe in Jesus. What are you going to do with that? You still going to hide behind, oh, Christians are into indoctrination? 75% of ministers' kids do not follow Jesus Christ. Well, obviously, it knocks your whole theory right into the garbage can.
I was asking you what the difference between indoctrination.
No, you went further than that. That's where you started. But then you went further and said, and Christians indoctrinate people and all that kind of stuff. And that's what came out.
They weren't successful in the indoctrination doesn't mean that it's not indoctrination.
Oh. If 75% of preachers' kids, ministers' kids don't believe in Christ anymore, mom and dad did a horrible indoctrination. Because when you start talking to preachers' kids, inevitably the reason they walked away from Christ is dad and mom were too busy with the people of their church, didn't give them much time, which is what I had to fight to make sure I was a coach, went to his games, supported him, loved him across the board. He needed to understand he's going to play what sport he wants to play. He's going to go to church, but he can believe whatever he wants to believe. I'm not going to force him to believe something. But yes, I'm going to teach him. And if you have a doctor who's aware of the fact that you are a woman who's never had a mammogram, if the doctor doesn't tell you, you need to go and get a mammogram, ma'am, because breast cancer is lethal, he doesn't give a rip about.
In the dialogue above, the speakers debate whether the failure of religious transmission disproves indoctrination, and I find the indoctrination accusation internally incoherent and empirically unsupported. If indoctrination were as effective and coercive as claimed, widespread apostasy among ministers' children would be inexplicable. The data cuts against the charge rather than supporting it. The attempt to rescue the claim by redefining indoctrination as failed coercion empties the concept of meaning. A process that neither compels belief nor prevents rejection does not meet any serious definition of indoctrination. The medical analogy is precise. Withholding life-guiding information out of fear of influence is not neutrality but negligence. Teaching is not the same as forcing. Concern is not coercion. Acknowledging isolated abuses strengthens rather than weakens the argument. It distinguishes principled guidance from genuine manipulation. Generalizing from exceptions is analytically careless. We now continue with the debate or discussion.
It's totally inconsistent. One of my best friends in college, who's a strong Christian, said that his atheist parents said, absolutely no, you are not going anywhere Sunday morning. You are staying at home. Is that indoctrinating? He wasn't allowed to explore different worldviews like Christianity.
Yes.
Okay, good. So atheists indoctrinate just as much as Christians.
No.
Yeah, okay, that's a bald assertion. Bald assertion. What is the evidence? Absolutely no is not an argument. It's not an argument. What? That's an emotional bias. What is the evidence then?
No, you said that the amount of Christians and atheists that indoctrinate, but there's 10 times more Christians in America, And I would love to see
Percentage within the control group, absolute 110%. Atheists do not take their kids to church. That's a form of indoctrination as well. Just because somebody takes their kids to church and says, hey, we're going to church today, just like you're going to go to school during the week. A lot of parents just take their kids to church just so they can have a moral foundation of ethics. Just like school, you're going to learn in order to actually have a healthy...
In the dialogue above, the speakers dispute whether atheistic households avoid indoctrination, and I find the claim that atheism is neutral to be logically indefensible. Preventing a child from encountering religious alternatives is itself a form of ideological control. Exclusion is not freedom, it is selective exposure. The denial that atheists indoctrinate relies on assertion rather than evidence. When challenged, the response shifts from principle to population size, which is irrelevant to the validity of the claim. The demand for proportional analysis exposes the weakness of the objection. Indoctrination is not measured by majority status, but by formative intent and restriction of alternatives. Framing church attendance as uniquely coercive while treating compulsory schooling and enforced secularism as neutral is inconsistent. Moral formation occurs regardless of worldview. The exchange demonstrates that free thinking is not the monopoly of any ideology. It is a discipline, not a demographic. We now continue with the debate or discussion.
Unfortunately, are very closed off in their thinking. They claim to be free thinkers, and I'm very open to the evidence, but the vast majority of them that we meet, and you've been doing it for 47 years, they are very closed off. And that's why I like the kid before you who was an atheist, and he was quite open. Very open to different worldviews and said, I don't know at the end of the day. And so I would urge you to have the same type of perspective. Just because there's some abuse in the church, just because there's some abuse in atheistic regimes, does not mean it's untrue. Just because Beethoven was such a fantastic musician and I play Beethoven very poorly, I am not musically gifted, does not mean that that's a reflection on Beethoven himself. Beethoven is still a great musician.
I'd like to end with religions being different TVs, right? And there are different channels on TV, and that atheism, which you were claiming it's also like restricting somebody and putting them down a tunnel, is the equivalent of turning that TV off and letting them, explore to go to one of those things, or to fill that zone with other types of philosophy or ways of thinking, and appreciating their world and
In the dialogue above, the speakers argue over openness, abuse, and truth, and I find the appeal to abuse as a refutation of belief logically invalid. Pointing to moral failure does not disprove moral truth. Confusing practitioners with principles is a categorical error. The Beethoven analogy clarifies the mistake. Poor performance does not invalidate excellence. Misuse does not negate truth. The claim that atheism merely turns off the channel misrepresents neutrality. Removing one framework always replaces it with another. Silence is still instruction. True openness is demonstrated by the willingness to say, I don't know, not by the pretense of neutrality. Intellectual humility, not ideological exclusion, defines free inquiry. We now continue with the debate or discussion.
Understanding the world. Yeah.
But there is an unfortunate historical fact. Jesus lived a sinless life, died on a cross for forgiving his enemies, and rose from the dead. And Jesus Christ has led the charge for respecting women, respecting people of all races, because we're all created in the image of God. He has led that charge. There's nobody who's impacted this world when it comes to racial equality, gender equality, more than Jesus Christ. But let's talk about an historical fact. You put Mao Zedong, Joseph Stalin, and Adolf Hitler together, and their worldview, their philosophy of life, was perfectly justified in what they did, slaughtering millions of people. When Christians murder people, that is hypocrisy. That is wrong. It's a violation of what Jesus taught. When an atheist slaughters people, that is not a violation of their moral relativism. That is not a violation of their nihilism. And don't take it from me, read Friedrich Nietzsche, Albert Camus, Jean-Paul Sartre. It's real clear. intellectually consistent. No God, morality is relative. You can love people, you can murder them. It's all relative. You follow Jesus Christ and you're a hypocrite, you murder, you hate people, you're racist, you're a flaming phony. Flat out. That's all I'm saying.
No, I would agree with that.
So if morality is not objective, you have wiped out the basis of critiquing Stalin, Hitler, because it's all relative. So you take your little cultural prejudices and...
In the dialogue above, the speakers argue that objective moral condemnation requires a transcendent moral source, and I find this argument logically coherent and forceful. The distinction between hypocrisy and consistency is crucial. Christian violence contradicts Christian ethics. Secular violence does not contradict moral relativism. That asymmetry matters. The appeal to Nietzsche, Camus, and Sartre is not rhetorical excess but philosophical grounding. If morality is not objective, moral outrage becomes expressive preference, not judgment. The argument does not deny that atheists can behave morally. It challenges whether moral condemnation has any binding force without an objective standard. This exchange exposes the cost of relativism. It preserves freedom at the expense of moral authority. One may still protest evil, but only inconsistently. We now continue with the debate or discussion.
And get out. Mao Zedong was Chinese. Different culture. You have no business telling him from your culture, Mao Zedong, that was wrong what you did. You're a different culture from Adolf Hitler. You have no basis for telling a Nazi German slaughtering Jews in Dachau and Auschwitz is wrong.
Morality is not objective, but it can be reasoned and logically came to through like philosophy, like John Rawls' A Theory of Justice.
You bet.
And there are people that yes, I can critique those people.
The only problem is Stalin had his reasons, Hitler had his reasons. And I'm an arrogant twit if I say my reasoning is right and your reasoning is wrong. What you have is you hold on to truth. And you say, with my mind, I'm getting in touch with truth, Hitler. I'm getting in touch with truth, Mao Zedong. If you're a consistent atheist, you know truth does not exist. Truth is just something you perceive with your own bias, with your own cultural prejudice. Come on, man, what's ethnocentrism?
In the dialogue above, the speakers argue that moral relativism collapses the possibility of condemning historical atrocities, and I find this argument logically compelling. If morality is culturally relative, then moral critique becomes an act of cultural imperialism rather than ethical judgment. The language of wrong loses its force. Appeals to reason alone do not solve the problem. Competing rational systems can justify incompatible conclusions, including violence. Reason without a moral anchor arbitrates nothing. The charge of ethnocentrism is decisive. Without objective morality, condemning genocide becomes an expression of taste, not truth. This exposes a contradiction. Relativism borrows moral outrage it cannot justify. It lives off moral capital it cannot generate. We now continue with the debate or discussion.
Wants to say slaughtering people is good? For him, it's good. But if I'm a follower of Christ and I say slaughtering Jews is good, I'm a hypocrite because I'm contradicting Jesus Christ. I'm contradicting the good character of God. And that's why I respect Nietzsche, Camus, and Sartre, because they had the honesty to take their atheism seriously, and they said, it's all a cosmic crapshoot. You define it your way, I define it my way. I'm not right, you're not wrong. You're not right, I'm not wrong. It's all relative, man. You can't live that out, and I'm glad you don't, sir. You know very well that you as an atheist have a conscience that tells you, no. Although I might say with the top of my head, morality...
In the dialogue above, the speakers argue that moral relativism cannot be lived consistently, and I find this argument persuasive. The appeal to conscience exposes the contradiction. People deny objective morality in theory, but rely on it in practice. The accusation of hypocrisy is not personal, but philosophical. Living as though some acts are absolutely wrong while denying moral absolutes is incoherent. The respect shown toward atheist philosophers is strategic and fair. Their consistency highlights the inconsistency of everyday relativism. This exchange clarifies the cost of denying moral realism. One must either abandon moral outrage or abandon relativism. Most choose neither honestly. We now continue with the debate or discussion.
Objectively wrong if I wanted people to not kill me to go kill people, right? That's the golden rule. The golden rule is a great example of logic being able to work its way and for something to be objective.
Oh,
right?
I disagree
Go
totally.
off.
You scratch my back, I'll scratch your back. Makes some sense. You stick the knife in my back, I scratch your back and help you? That's stupid. That's what Jesus taught. Jesus taught not just you scratch my back and then, baby, tit for tat, I'll scratch your back. You help me, and then I got a reason to help you. Jesus said, the guy who sticks the knife in your back, you go out and help him. You love your enemy. That, sir,
In the dialogue above, the speakers debate whether morality can be grounded in logic alone, and I find the appeal to pure reason insufficient. The golden rule cannot arise from logic by itself. Logic describes consistency, not obligation. It cannot explain why one ought to value another person's life. Reciprocity works only under conditions of mutual advantage. Loving an enemy violates rational self-interest and therefore cannot be justified by evolutionary or pragmatic reasoning. The charge of stupidity exposes the core issue. Enemy love is irrational unless reality is structured by a moral source beyond survival and power. This exchange clarifies the distinction. Reason can calculate means, but it cannot generate moral ends. The Christian ethic only makes sense if love is foundational to reality itself. We now continue with the debate or discussion.
understand. When they said to me, Cliffe, you said you got racist friends? You're an idiot. You have friends who are racist? And I said, yes, ma'am. But they're still human beings created in the image of God, and they still have value. I deplore their racism, but I love them and respect them as human beings created in the image of God.
Violence is a cycle, and if we keep on breaking it, at some point we have to find within ourselves to say, continuing this cycle of violence only leads to more violence, and we need to stop it, right? I mean, you look at the historical things of Ireland and like any world conflict, right? To some extent, you have to say, all right, we're going to be the bigger person and not do this in order to end the cycle of violence for all human good.
No, buddy, I appreciate your altruism.
Right. And
we're going to be bigger people.
If somebody stabs me and I stab him back, then
Yeah.
I get stabbed back again, right? Like,
I could give a rip about the cycle.
so
I
that's
care about
why
my
I
family.
would be kind to somebody
You
who
stick
stabbed
him,
me.
you stick him or you stick me, I'm coming after you, bud, to teach you don't do that ever again. If you do, I'm going to knife you.
That's a contradiction to what you just said.
In the dialogue above, the speakers contrast enemy love with retaliatory self-interest, and I find the retaliatory position internally inconsistent within a relativistic framework. The appeal to human dignity is decisive. Loving a person while condemning their actions requires a moral distinction between value and behavior. That distinction presupposes inherent worth, not social utility. The call to end the cycle of violence cannot be grounded in self-interest alone. Retaliation is always easier to justify pragmatically. Choosing restraint requires a moral obligation that transcends survival instincts. The counter-argument openly prioritizes kin loyalty over universal ethics. That position may be emotionally honest, but it abandons any claim to moral universality. Without a transcendent grounding of human value, altruism becomes optional sentiment rather than binding duty. The argument unintentionally concedes this point. We now continue with the debate or discussion.
Jesus wants you to do.
Thank you. I'm jumping into your worldview. And if your worldview is morality is relative, I am not going to love my enemy. I'm not going to love the guy who sticks in with a knife. If morality is relative and it's all a crapshoot, you stick him with a knife, I'm coming after you, bud. Because you better not stick him again.
In the dialogue above, the speakers expose the internal logic of moral relativism by temporarily inhabiting it, and I find this maneuver philosophically decisive. Once moral objectivity is denied, retaliation becomes not only permissible, but rational. Appeals to restraint lose their authority. The question why cannot be answered within relativism. Any response reduces to preference, power, or fear, none of which bind another agent morally. By stepping inside the opposing worldview, the argument reveals its consequences rather than merely criticizing it from the outside. This is a legitimate and effective philosophical strategy. The exchange demonstrates that moral relativism cannot ground moral criticism, only behavioral negotiation. We now continue with the debate or discussion. In the dialogue above, the speakers argue that consistent atheism leads to moral absurdity or evolutionary dominance, and I find this argument largely persuasive. Camus' honesty exposes the existential cost of denying objective meaning. Absurdity is not an insult, but a conclusion drawn from the premises. The evolutionary critique is strategically sharp. Survival-based morality explains behavior, but cannot justify compassion beyond tribal interest. Calls for global moral cooperation are emotionally appealing but philosophically unsupported within strict naturalism. The desire for peace exceeds what evolution alone can command. This segment clarifies the core tension. Atheism can describe why we act, but it cannot obligate us to act morally against self-interest. We now continue with the debate or discussion. In the dialogue above, the speakers argue that moral progress requires a transcendent standard above human law, and I find this argument compelling. Martin Luther King Jr.'s appeal only works if moral authority exceeds legal authority. Without a higher law, civil disobedience becomes mere preference against power. The phrase law above the law captures the logical necessity of moral transcendence. Cultural norms alone cannot justify condemning unjust laws. Invoking conscience without grounding reduces it to sentiment. King's argument presupposes objective moral truth, not collective agreement. This exchange shows that the moral victories of history borrow their authority from transcendence, even when articulated in secular language. We now continue with the debate or discussion. In the dialogue above, the speakers argue that justice can be derived from reason alone through fair procedures, and I find this argument incomplete and ultimately insufficient. Rawls's veil of ignorance describes a method for minimizing bias, not a foundation for moral obligation. It explains strategy, not duty. The cookie analogy presumes that fairness is already valued. Reason can optimize fairness, but it cannot explain why fairness is morally binding. Procedural symmetry does not generate moral truth. It only distributes advantage under assumed values. This exchange reveals the gap. Secular theories can organize justice, but they quietly borrow moral weight they cannot independently justify. We now continue with the debate or discussion. In the dialogue above, the speakers argue that Christian morality uniquely sustains sacrificial ethics under suffering, and I find this argument coherent and historically grounded. The appeal to imago Dei supplies a non-negotiable basis for human equality. Value is not earned, negotiated, or optimized, it is given. The example of Eric Liddell illustrates lived coherence. Sacrifice motivated by devotion outlasts rational calculation when incentives disappear. Joy under suffering functions as moral evidence, not psychological trickery. It signals alignment between belief and lived reality. This segment demonstrates that transcendent morality does not merely survive pressure, it becomes most visible under it. We now continue with the debate or discussion. In the dialogue above, the speakers clarify that the dispute is not about moral behavior, but about moral grounding, and I find this clarification decisive. The argument does not deny that atheists act compassionately. It questions whether compassion has an objective foundation without transcendence. Human rights language presupposes inherent value. Without a mind prior to the human mind, value becomes a human projection rather than a moral fact. The metaphor of floating is apt. Moral intuitions persist, but their justification has been removed. The structure remains while the foundation is gone. This exchange resolves the misunderstanding. The claim is not exclusivity of virtue, but exclusivity of grounding. Across the dialogue, the central claim emerges with clarity. Moral outrage, human rights, equality, and sacrificial love all require an objective moral foundation. Attempts to ground morality in reason, evolution, or social consensus consistently fail under pressure, contradiction, or relativism. The debate demonstrates that while secular frameworks can describe moral behavior, they cannot obligate it. Christian theism, by contrast, provides a coherent basis for moral duty, human dignity, and the critique of injustice through a law above the law. This conclusion is not an attack on persons, but an evaluation of worldviews. The dialogue shows that moral realism survives scrutiny only when grounded in transcendence.